I met my husband that I divorced 3 years ago. What happens when the love of your life becomes a stranger, only to reappear years later, healed, glowing, and maybe still in love with you too? 3 years after a painful divorce, I found myself staring across a coffee shop table at the man I never stopped loving. This isn't just a story about second chances. It's about timing, healing, and the one person who always felt like home. When I first asked my ex-husband for a divorce, I think a part of me broke in a way I didn't fully understand at the time. From the outside, people might have seen a man finally taking control of his life, letting go of a partner who had stopped showing up for their relationship. But the truth was far more painful and complex. I didn't stop loving him. I left because I couldn't save him, and he wouldn't save himself. He had spiraled into a deep depression after the sudden, tragic death of his younger brother. That grief slowly turned into a kind of emotional paralysis. He began missing work, eventually lost his job, and withdrew from everything and everyone, including me. Our home became heavy with silence and unspoken pain. I tried everything I could to reach him: comfort, conversations, therapy suggestions, even tough love. But nothing worked. He refused therapy, wouldn't take his medication, and turned to alcohol to numb the pain. In the final stretch of our marriage, I began drinking too. Something I never thought I'd do, just to cope. It wasn't an impulsive decision to leave. I stayed for years, hoping that one day he would wake up and decide to fight for his own life, and for us. I waited through countless false starts and broken promises. I begged. I cried. I watched the man I loved fade away and felt powerless to stop it. The day I asked for the divorce, I was sobbing uncontrollably. It wasn't about anger or resentment. It was grief. And when I handed him the papers, he looked at me with an expression so empty, so devoid of life, that it haunted me for years after. He didn't argue. He didn't cry. He just signed. I tried to put on a brave face for my friends and family. I said all the right things. It was the best decision. I feel free. It's time for a new chapter. But deep down, I knew I was lying. Every night, I reached for a body that wasn't there. Every day I came home expecting to see a car that had long since disappeared. The absence of his presence became a constant ache I carried everywhere. I thought time would eventually dull the pain, but it didn't. Instead, I adapted to it, functioning with a low hum of heartbreak in the background. I stalked his social media more often than I should admit, watching him from afar as he started to come back to life. I saw the changes. He was going to the gym again, smiling in photos, sober, and even speaking publicly about being on medication. That progress, which I had once prayed so desperately for, now arrived in my absence. It filled me with pride and sorrow in equal measure. Was I the one who had held him back? Could I have waited longer? Did I give up too soon? But those questions, as painful as they were, also stirred something else in me. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, if there was still a spark, still a chance, I had to know. And that's when everything began to shift. That flicker of hope, that dangerous, beautiful little ember, began to grow every time I saw his smile on my screen. He looked different now, and not just physically. There was a light in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. I saw a man who had fought his demons and, at least for the moment, was winning. The man I fell in love with at 16. The one who made me believe in forever, was beginning to return in pieces through those filtered snapshots and short captions. It felt surreal, seeing him live the kind of life I always wished he could have had without me. There was pride in it, yes, but also a strange guilt I couldn't shake. For a while I kept telling myself I was just being nostalgic, that I missed the idea of him, not the reality. But the more I watched from a distance, the more I realized I wasn't just mourning the past. I was aching for the possibility of a future. Eventually, I couldn't bear to just observe anymore. I needed to hear his voice, to know if that same warmth I remembered was still there. The last time we spoke had been over 2 years ago, after one of his final drinking episodes. It had ended badly. I wasn't sure if he'd even want to talk to me again. Still, I picked up the phone one evening, heart pounding, and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. Hearing his voice again after so long made my throat tighten. It was familiar and foreign all at once, like a song I hadn't heard in years that still stirred something deep inside. The conversation started off awkward. There were long pauses and careful words, but then he said he was glad I called. Those 5 words melted something frozen in me. We talked for a while, nothing too deep, mostly surface-level updates, but beneath every sentence was a current of shared history we both felt but didn't name. Before we hung up, I asked if he wanted to get coffee sometime. He didn't hesitate before saying yes. When we met the next day, I could hardly breathe as he walked toward me. He looked incredible, healthier, more grounded, more himself than I remembered. He'd lost the weight he'd gained during his depression, sure, but it wasn't just physical. He carried himself differently. There was a steadiness in him that hadn't been there before. And yet, when his eyes met mine, that same old spark flickered to life. We talked for hours. He told me about his DUI, that terrifying wake-up call that finally pushed him into rehab. He'd gone to AA, gotten sober, and stayed sober. He was working again, on medication, going to the gym, and reconnecting with life. And when he said he was proud of how far he'd come, I told him I was proud too, and meant it with every fiber of my being. As I listened, I felt something strange and overwhelming. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time in a long time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, this story wasn't over yet. That coffee date felt like waking up from a long, restless sleep. It was supposed to be casual, just 2 people catching up after years apart. But somewhere between the nervous laughter and the quiet confessions, it became something more. There was an unspoken recognition, something in the way he looked at me, like he was remembering too. After our drinks, neither of us seemed ready to say goodbye, so we went on a walk through the park nearby. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden light through the trees, and we fell into an easy rhythm like we used to. We talked about small things, mutual friends, work, TV shows we were watching. But beneath it all was a deeper pull, like gravity drawing us slowly back together. I caught myself reaching out to take his hand once or twice, only to stop just short. But then we sat down on a bench, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told him everything, how I had never stopped loving him, how every birthday, every anniversary, even the quiet Tuesday mornings, I'd thought about him, how I had wanted to reach out so many times, but was afraid I had lost him forever, how proud I was of him for getting help, and how much I wished I could be part of this new chapter in his life. And then I asked, If he felt even a sliver of what I did, could we try again? He didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at me with that same deep, searching gaze I used to know so well. And then he said something I'll never forget. He told me he was still healing, that depression doesn't just disappear, that he still had bad days. But the difference now was that he wasn't running from it anymore. He was trying, really genuinely trying. And he promised that if we gave it another shot, he would never stop putting in the effort. He wouldn't shut down or push me away like before. He couldn't promise perfection, but he could promise presence. Tears welled up in my eyes before I could stop them. I told him that was all I ever needed. And then, in a moment so quiet it almost didn't feel real, he pulled me into his arms and kissed my temple. I closed my eyes and just let myself breathe him in. It was comfort. It was home. It was that impossible blend of relief and joy and nervousness that only comes when something once broken finally begins to mend. He walked me to my car afterward and held my hand as we said goodbye. The second I got in and closed the door, I broke down. Full on, messy, grateful sobs. But for once, they weren't tears of loss. They were tears of hope. We started texting that same night, falling back into our old rhythm so easily it was almost frightening. We decided to go on an official date. He said he wanted to plan everything, said he owed me a few missed birthdays and anniversaries, and that this time he wouldn't miss a thing. The anticipation leading up to our official date was unlike anything I'd felt in years. I found myself staring at my closet like a teenager, obsessing over what to wear, what cologne to use, whether I should style my hair the way he used to like. It was almost ridiculous how nervous I was, considering we had been married. But this wasn't a continuation, it was a new beginning, and somehow that made it even more nerve-wracking. He picked me up right on time, grinning like an idiot when I opened the door. I asked where we were going, but he just told me to dress warm and trust him. That smile on his face, that glint in his eye, I hadn't seen it in so long, and it hit me all over again how much I missed it. And missed him. Our first stop? The old ice skating rink where we met as teenagers. It hadn't changed much. Still a little run down and freezing, but the second we stepped inside, I was hit with a wave of nostalgia so intense it nearly knocked me off my feet. He used to play hockey there, and I'd take figure skating lessons, at least until the bullying got too bad. I remember sneaking glances at him during practice, the way his skates cut clean across the ice, how fearless he looked even back then. He laced up my skates for me like he used to, and we stepped onto the rink together. I was shaky, clumsy, and nowhere near as graceful as I once was, but he stayed close. When I started to fall, he caught me with a laugh and pulled me upright by the waist. I swear my heart nearly stopped. At one point, when I said my face was freezing, he turned around and cupped my cheeks with his gloved hands, warming me with a look that made me feel 17 again. But he wasn't done. After skating, he took me to dinner at the same tiny restaurant we had our first date in. It was still greasy, still full of mismatched chairs and scuffed tables, and still perfect. He held my hand under the table just like he did all those years ago, made the same dumb jokes, and smiled at me like I hung the stars. I didn't think I could fall for him any harder, but somehow, over cheap burgers and curly fries, I did. Then came the final surprise. He drove us out to the dark sky park where he had proposed to me 10 years ago. Blankets, sparkling grape juice and plastic champagne flutes, and the open sky above us. We lay there for a while, quietly listening to each other breathe. Hearts synced like they used to be. Then, softly, He told me he still loved me. I don't know how I managed not to cry. I whispered that I loved him too, and when he asked if I wanted to change venues, I didn't hesitate. That night, for the first time in years, I fell asleep with his arms around me again. The ache I'd been carrying in my chest for so long finally softened. Waking up in his bed the next morning felt like stepping into a dream I had visited 1,000 times before. Except this time, it was real. His arm was draped over me like it used to be, his breathing slow and steady against my neck. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to break the spell. For the first time in years, the world felt quiet, peaceful. We lay there for a while, just existing. No rush, no pressure, just two people rediscovering what it meant to feel safe in each other's presence. When we finally stirred, we talked, softly, sleepily, about everything, about what this meant, about what we wanted. We agreed that we weren't going to call each other boyfriends. It felt too adolescent, too new for something so deeply rooted. Instead, we settled on partners. It felt right. It felt earned. Throughout the day, little things kept hitting me. His voice humming while he made breakfast, the way he always cut toast diagonally, how he still left his socks absolutely everywhere. And instead of irritating me, it made me smile. It reminded me that love isn't always about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's found in the tiniest familiar details you didn't realize you missed. Of course, there was still the reality of our past. We had scars. We had hurt each other in ways that couldn't be undone. But there was also forgiveness, growth, a sense of maturity we didn't have the first time around. We knew now that love alone doesn't save anyone, but effort, communication, and shared commitment might. The following week was filled with quiet joy. We didn't try to rush anything. We went on long walks, cooked together, watched terrible TV, and laughed until our cheeks hurt. It was like building a home again. Not a physical space, but an emotional one. Every shared smile, every small act of care was a new brick. Eventually, we knew we'd have to tell our families and friends. That conversation will come, and we'll handle it together. Some people may not understand. Some may have opinions, but for once, that doesn't scare me. What matters most is that we're choosing each other again, not because we're afraid of being alone, but because we genuinely believe we can do better this time. And we can. The man lying next to me now isn't the same one I divorced, and I'm not the same person who walked away. We've both changed, broken, and rebuilt ourselves in different ways, and now, as we carefully stitch our lives back together, I realize something. This love is different than it was before. It's not just passion or comfort. It's resilience. It's conscious. It's hard-won. We might not know what the future holds, but we know this. We want to face it together. So here we are, older, wiser, a little more bruised, but still in love. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes it beautiful. Thank you for rooting for us. I never expected to fall back into the arms I once had to leave, but I'm so, so glad I did.